Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Thanks for joining me today. So on today's video, we are going through prophecy through the lens of the Bible. How exciting. So we are going to look at the book of Daniel, specifically Daniel chapter 2, where King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And we will also be touching on what history says about this very dream. It is such an exciting study. I hope you stay tuned and you enjoy this video.
Alrighty. Okay. So, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and in this dream, certain events happened, but he could not remember what the dream was, and it troubled him greatly, right? So you can go and read Daniel 2 in its entirety. You will see this explanation. So essentially, he had trouble, and he inquired of his wise men. So in the wise men, we find sorcerers, we find enchanters, and so forth. And he basically asked them to read his mind. And he essentially said that he wanted to know what he dreamt and basically the interpretation of what his dream was, right? Which was a tall order because, like I said, these were sorcerers, so their power was really not really power that came from the Most High. So they couldn't really read his mind as to what he had dreamt, right? And so him being upset at the fact that they could not do what they claimed to do, he issued out a death decree to kill all the wise men in Babylon, right? In this meeting, Daniel and the three Hebrew boys, which were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were not in this meeting when the king issued out the death decree. So they found out through their Roman, Babylonian soldier that there was a decree to kill all the wise men of Babylon. But they inquired of the king to give them more time so that they prayed to the God of heaven, and the God of heaven would deliver this dream to them. And the king did give them more time so that they pray on this matter. And so Daniel and the three Hebrew boys prayed on this matter, and then God certainly delivered the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had to Daniel, as well as the interpretation. So on verse 31, this is Daniel basically telling Nebuchadnezzar what he dreamt. So it says that you saw, O king, and behold a great image. This image, mighty and exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them to pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So that's the dream. And then, so this is the interpretation. We find it in verse 36 up until 43. It says, this was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of men, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all, you are the head of gold, right? Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth, and there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And then, like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay, and as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay, right? So according to the interpretation, we can see that basically what is happening here is that this statue that Nebuchadnezzar had is a representative of kingdoms to rule from Babylon and the preceding kingdoms to conquer Babylon up until the end of the world. So the rock that struck the statue at the feet area is the coming of Jesus Christ himself, which established an everlasting kingdom, right? So so you can see that this is a timeline of Earth's history from Babylon up until the end of the world. So we have identified, according to Daniel 2, that the head of gold is Babylon. the kings of Babylon, or the rulers of Babylon that are identified in the Bible, is King Nebuchadnezzar. We find this in Daniel 1 till Daniel 4. We also have King Belshazzar, his grandson, in Daniel 5, Daniel 7, as well as Daniel 8. And then according to secular history, according to history books, the timeline that Babylon ruled the world was 605 up until 539 BC. Right? So that is the timeline. Now that we have identified that this whole statue is about kingdoms of the world, now we need to find out who is the chest and arms of silver. All right? Just give me a thumbs up if you guys are following, right? So in Daniel 5, we have an event that is happening, and the ruling king is King Belshazzar, the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar. Let us see what's happening. So King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the thousands. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Just to give you context also, so these vessels that King Belshazzar is taking is essentially vessels that were taken when King Nebuchadnezzar took the Israelites captive from Jerusalem and took them to Babylon. So why that happened was because Israel had rebelled against God, right? So when they started rebelling against God, they essentially came out of the protection of the Lord. So we need to realize also as Christians that if we continue with sin, we are essentially separating ourselves from the protection of God. The law of God is meant to protect us, but the minute we move out of it, we are removing ourselves from the hedge of protection that God has for us. So that is essentially what happened with the Israelites, right? And then you find in Jeremiah, Jeremiah forewarns the Israelites of what is to come to them. He tells them that there will be a king that comes that will capture them and that will take them as captives, so basically as slaves, right? So this is fulfilled when Nebuchadnezzar came and he basically, so Nebuchadnezzar was a pagan king. He didn't believe in God, but because, like I said, Israel had rebelled against God, they basically allowed the devil to take them captive through Nebuchadnezzar, right? So when Nebuchadnezzar essentially captured the Israelites from Jerusalem, he took spoils from Jerusalem. And one of the spoils that he took was these vessels that were used in the holy temple to reverence God, right? So now we see King Belshazzar, he's hosting a party for his friends, for his governors, for his wives, and all of that. And in that, he's drunk, and then he decides to take those vessels and basically drink the common wine that he was drinking with the vessels of God. And this angered the Lord, all right? So we see in verse 5 to 9, it says, in the same hour, came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. I'm sure many of us know the story where we know that King Belshazzar saw a hand writing on the wall, right? So then it says in verse 6, then the king's countenance was changed and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joint of his loins were loosed and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read these writings and shew me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writings nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. So like his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar, he called in the astrologers, all the soothsayers, all the wizards, and everybody, the wise men of Babylon, but they could not read what was on the wall, right? Then in verse 10, it says, the queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, right? Who the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So again, Daniel is brought into the front to interpret what the writing of the wall is. So in verse 24, we see, then from his presence the hand was sent, and the writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. And then in Daniel 6:28, we see, so Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So now, according to Daniel 5, we see that the kingdom that conquered Babylon, remember, the head of gold was Babylon. There was a chest and arms of silver that was to conquer Babylon. So according to Daniel 5, we see that the Medes and the Persians are the ones that conquered Babylon. So the Medes, we find Darius the Great. So we can also find him referenced in Daniel 6, Daniel 9, as well as Daniel 11. Then Cyrus the Great, the Persian, is made. So it says, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had two horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great, right? So now Daniel is receiving a vision. He sees basically a ram which had two horns, right? And basically it is charging eastward, westward, and southward, right? I'm just trying to skip. Then it says, as I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth, without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came to the ram with the two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and struck the ram and broke his two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of heaven. And when he had spoken to me, so basically now Daniel is inquiring of God regarding what is happening, what is this dream all about? Then God sent him Gabriel, the angel, to interpret this dream to him. So you guys can read it in full in Daniel 8. So I'm just basically summarizing for the purpose of this presentation, not to be too long, right? So it says, and when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand up. He said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation, for it refers to the appointed time of the end. As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of the Medes and the Persians, right? Of Media and Persia, basically. And the goat is the king of Greece. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which four others arose, four kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. So then now, the angel Gabriel is telling Daniel that what you're seeing in this dream pertains to the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. It's a continuation. So now you're seeing who is about to conquer the Medes and the Persians, right? And it says here, it is the Greek Empire, right? And then he says that the first horn on this goat that represents the Greek Empire is the first king. And then after the first king dies, there's going to be four new powers within the same Greek kingdom that is going to rule in the Greek kingdom, right? So then, because we can see that it's a similar dream tied to Daniel 2, we can safely say that the Bronze Kingdom is the Greek kingdom, right? We are not given the name of the ruler, right? So with the other two kingdoms, we know that Nebuchadnezzar is the one that ruled Babylon, which is the golden kingdom. The silver kingdom, we saw that it is Darius as well as Cyrus the Great, right? So in this one, we are given a kingdom, which is the Greek kingdom, but we are given, we're not given the names of the rulers, but we are given keys, right? So we can see that there is a horn, which first rules the Greek kingdom. And then after that horn, four new horns ruled after the first horn died or was broken off, right? So this is the depiction that we see, right? The goat is the kingdom of Greece, like I had said, and then the great horn between his eyes is the first king. Then Daniel 8:22 says, as the horn that was broken in pieces, of which 4 others arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not of his power. So now we're going to look at secular history and what it says regarding who ruled the Greek kingdom, right? The empire of the Greek Empire. So we can find books from history. So these books are the Anabasis of Alexander by Arrian, Library of History, Book 17, History of Alexander the Great by Quintus, Life of Alexander the Great, part of the Parallel Lives by Plutarch. And then we have a quote by Alexander the Great saying, our enemies are Medes and Persians, men who for centuries have lived soft and luxurious lives. We of Macedon for generations past have been trained in the hard school of danger and war. Above all, we are free men and they are slaves. So this is Alexander the Great. So from these books, we can see that Alexander the Great is the leader of the Greek kingdom who conquered the Medes and the Persians. I just want to pause here because this right here, I've said it even in my videos on TikTok to say that this right here, the story about Alexander the Great, this blew my mind because I don't know how many of you have studied history, but through Alexander the Great, I was mind blown that the Bible pinpoints what is happening and who will rule in these different kingdoms. So when I read the story about Alexander the Great, which parallels what is happening in the Bible, you could not convince me otherwise that the Bible is the true book. You could not convince me that the God of the Bible is not the true God. Because remember, this that he is showing to both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel, to them, it is future tense. To us, it is history. We read it as secular history. We didn't even take this from the Bible. We read it as history that was foretold, right? But the God of heaven showed this to both Nebuchadnezzar as well as Daniel. So you can see that God lives outside of time. And he does things in transparency. He will not hide anything to his people. It even says in the Bible that I will do nothing unless I reveal it first to my prophets. How amazing is God and how loving is the God of the Bible? It's so amazing. Okay, let's move on. So then history confirms that Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire. And then in Daniel 8:21, we reiterating this, the great goat, or rather the goat is the kingdom of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. So the first king is Alexander the Great, all right? Then history also confirms that after Alexander the Great died, guys, you can Google this. I'm not making all of these things up. You can check this on Google. After Alexander the Great died, his empire was divided into amongst his 4 generals. Daniel is shown in Daniel 8:22 that the first horn, after it is cut off, there are 4 new horns that arose, right? 4 new kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not of his power, or not with his power. So within this Greek empire, we see 4 new kingdoms, and we see history confirming that 4 generals of Alexander the Great ruled after he had died. How amazing. How amazing is this? So now I hope I had convinced you that the Bible is true, okay? Let us move on to see who the next kingdom is. Okay. So we had identified that the bronze kingdom of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar is the Greek Empire. So just to recap for people that are just joining, the Daniel 2 statue that Nebuchadnezzar had, the gold represented Babylon, the silver kingdom, the chest and arms of silver represented the Medes and the Persians. The Bronze Empire represents the Greek Empire, right? So the Greek Empire was ruled by Alexander the Great and his 4 generals. So if we check secular history at the timeline of this event, or of this historical event, it started in 331 BC and ended at 168 BC, right? Now we get to the legs of iron, right? So who is the legs of iron? So in Daniel, we find the 3 kingdoms mentioned, Babylon, Medo-Persia, as well as the Greek Empire. However, the Iron Kingdom is not specifically mentioned by name as to who it is. But we have seen that the statue that Nebuchadnezzar is seeing ties with history. So as a result of that, we will then use a process of elimination to see history. We will look at secular history to check who these legs of iron represent in secular history. So basically, who is the kingdom that conquered the Greek Empire, right? So history confirms that Rome was governed as a republic, not yet as an empire, which began later with Augustus in 27 BC, right? So by this time, Rome controlled Italy and had expanded into Greece and the East, defeating major Hellenistic kingdoms, right? So the Battle of Pydna in 168 BC, a pivotal moment, Rome decisively defeated the Kingdom of Macedonia, which is the Greek kingdom, ending its independence and marking Rome's first control over the Greek world. Dominant power. So Rome was the leading force in the ancient Mediterranean, building its vast territory through military conquest and political influence. So according to history, Rome conquered the Greek Empire, right? So who is the Iron Legs according to history? So it says that it is the Roman Republic. And the timeline we find in history is 168 BC up until 27 BC. This is the Republic, not the Empire, the Republic of Rome, right? So when it shifted to being a republic to now being an entire empire, this is from 27 BC all the way up to 476 AD. So if someone is confused about the BCs and the AD, what they represent, so BC essentially represents before Christ. So they are counting time before Christ was born, and then AD represented after Christ was basically crucified, all right? So an interesting thing that I thought I should slide into this presentation is about Pontius Pilate. We all know this because we have read in the Bible that he is one of the leading figures who ruled in the Roman Empire at the time when Christ was alive and doing his ministry. Pontius Pilate is also a figure that basically he was in charge of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, right? So when we check history, at when Pontius Pilate ruled, so it says here, Pontius Pilate was the 5th Roman governor or prefect of Judea, serving from 26 or 27 up until 36 to 37 AD under Emperor Tiberius, renowned for his role in the trial and crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which occurred around 30 or 33 AD. It's so interesting that in Daniel you find these things that were foretold, the empires that were to rule even before Jesus came. How mind-blowing, guys. Am I the only one that is excited about the study? Because God is just showing off. He's just showing his signature to say, yeah, I'm going to show you what's happening before it happens, so that when it happens, to the critics, they can believe. When they study secular history, they can tie back to the Bible and say, this truly is a spectacular book. It's not an ordinary book. There's something about this book. It is a holy book, right? So now that we have covered the legs of iron, that it stands for Rome, so who are the feet and toes of iron mixed with clay, right? So here it says the Roman Empire history confirms that the Roman Empire was divided in two. It's interesting because the legs are two legs, and then history confirms that the Roman Empire was actually divided in two. So in 286 AD, this is the date, Emperor Diocletian first divided the empire for easier governance, creating a separate Eastern and Western ruler, right? And then in 395 AD, the final permanent split occurs when Theodosius I dies, establishing distinct East and West political entities, right? Then the Roman Empire. So now we're at the feet, guys. The feet, remember, feet has 10 toes. So we see that the Roman Empire further fragments into 10 different kingdoms, right? It was so big that they had to subdivide it because it was such a large empire to govern, right? So it is interesting that this 10 barbarian tribes, as they would call them back in the day, is what we call modern day Europe. And these are the names of it. So the Alemanni today are called the Germans, the Burgundians are called the Swiss, the Franks are called the French, the Visigoths are called the Spanish, the Anglo-Saxons are called the British, the Lombards are the Italians, the Suevi are the Portuguese, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Heruli. These 3 tribes were extinct. All right. So, guys, this is such an interesting thing to discover, that 10 toes of that statue that Nebuchadnezzar had represent what we call today Europe. Are you mind blown, or is it just me? The Anglo-Saxons are a name that we still use even today to describe the British. I'm sure many of us are familiar with the name Anglo-Saxons, or even the Franks, which is the French. So yes, we can see that God pinpointed from the time of Nebuchadnezzar up until what we call today as Europe. We can see a timeline of Earth history, okay? So the Roman Empire stretched from the Republic of Rome up until what we call the ecclesiastical or modern day Europe, which started in 538 AD up until the end of the world, which is the second coming of Jesus Christ, right? So this is where I'm going to end my presentation. It's so exciting. I want us on our next presentation to cover the further details that regard this kingdom, the last kingdom, right? Because there's so much happening in the last kingdom. So you can see it's not only comprised of 10 toes, we can also see that there's a clay mixed with iron. Remember, the iron represents the Roman kingdom. But what does the clay represent? All right, what does the clay represent? So in our next presentation, we will cover what the clay actually represents, all right, within these 10 divided kingdoms, which comprise of the Roman kingdom, right? So this is the entire statue of Nebuchadnezzar, that Nebuchadnezzar saw. So just to recap, the head of gold is Babylon, which it started at 605 up to 539 BC. The chest and arms of silver is the Medo-Persian Empire, which started at 539 up until 331 BC. The belly and the thighs of bronze is the Greek Empire, at which Alexander the Great ruled. It started at 331 up until 168 BC. And then the legs of iron is Imperial Rome at 168 up until 476 AD. And then the feet and iron of clay is the ecclesiastical Rome at 538 AD. And it stretches all the way up until the second coming of Jesus Christ. We can all agree that we are still living in an age and era of the European Union. We all know that there's an EU. We all know that Europe is still somewhat a big, it's not a superpower in its sense, but it is still one of those big countries regarded in today's modern times, right? And then we can see a stone. That is the coming of Jesus Christ. And notice where the stone hits the statue. It hits it at the bottom, at the feet area. It doesn't hit it at the head of gold or the chest of arms or the belly or the legs. It hits it at the bottom. How interesting is that? We are living literally here. We are living literally here, and Jesus, guys, is coming back. Right? So that is what is exciting, that God foretells from the time of Nebuchadnezzar all the way up to our day and age. He foretells of all these events. These events are historical events, right? And we literally at the feet area. So we are going to see in detail what is the clay, as well as how does other books of Daniel tie into this, because they do give further detail regarding this, particularly Daniel 7. And then we will lastly tie in Revelations, because Revelations has beasts and all of that. And a lot of people, when they read it, they get so confused. But Daniel is a mirror of Revelation. So we will look into Revelation regarding what is happening. You can see in today's, there's a lot happening. There's wars, there's all of these things. We need to know where we are in the stream of time so that we can prepare ourselves, because God does not just show this timeline just for fun, for the fun of it. There's a reason as to why God shows us all of this. All right. It's because firstly, he loves us. And secondly, he wants us to prepare ourselves. Remember the opening text that I showed you on Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus tells that go to Daniel and you will see what is happening. Then you will know what to do, right? So yeah, friends, that is it on my side. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you have enjoyed my TikTok people, as well as people that are joining me on the presentation on Zoom. I hope you have enjoyed this study. So I will be doing the next study in after a week or so. I'll do the next study. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. Let us close with a word of prayer. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for your word this evening. Thank you, Lord, that you are a Father of love who shows us what is to happen in this world. You give us these texts so we can be comforted, so that we know what to do in the times that we are living in. Thank you, Father. May you protect each and every individual, be with them, cater to their needs. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.